Hello, this is Joel Susel. You're listening to Radio Chavura.
כשהלב בוכה, רק אלוהים שומע, הכאב עולה מתוך הנשמה. אדם נופל לפני שהוא שוקע, בתפילה קטנה חותך את הדממה.
Once a week in a small studio in the mile-high city of Denver, 3,520 cubits above sea level, gathers a group of friends and family. We nosh and schmooze, kibitz and kvel, teach and learn. Our community gave rise to the United Way, Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir, Samsonite luggage, and the Barbie doll. Now, for 30 minutes every Sunday evening, we present the greatest innovation since Hot Pockets and South Park. Welcome to Radio Chavura, your weekly dose of friendly, Colorado-style Yiddishkeit. Here, we share the nachas, pride we all feel about our community, our non-Jewish neighbors, and the state of Israel. So, pull up a chair, partake in the conversation, and connect with your community, your Chavura. I'm Dean Rotbard, who, along with my son and best friend Maxwell, are delighted to serve as your hosts.
שמע ישראל אלוהי, אתה כל יכול. נתת לי את חיי, נתת לי הכל. בעיניי דמעה, הלב בוקע בשקט. וכשהלב שותק, הנשמה זועקת. שמע ישראל אלוהי.
Welcome to another edition of Radio Chavura, coming to you from the Jewish Experience Center at 399 South Monaco. I'm Dean Rotbard, along with my son, best friend, and co-host,
Maxwell Rotbard.
Maxwell, we have an important topic and an important guest on this segment of Radio Chavura. We are going to deal with something that sometimes is hard for people to talk about, and yet it's important because it touches every one of our lives, and that is loss. Loss in particular in the form of a loved one, but loss comes in many different packages and many different sizes. Really within the Jewish community, I think that there is at least a recognition that when somebody has suffered a loss and is grieving, that being able to reach out to them, so whether you actually are somebody listening because you yourself are still in a grieving process, or whether you have a friend, a family member, or a neighbor, it's good to know a little bit about how to cope. And we have with us in the studio here at the Jewish Experience, Rachel Kodanaz, who is an author, a very popular speaker. She has done some coaching. She is the author of Living with Loss, One Day at a Time. I got to know her a little bit through Jewish and Widowed, an organization that we have been sponsors and supporters of. But I'm looking forward to getting to know her better on the program. So Rachel, welcome to Radio Chavura.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here today.
You know, something that I think is important about loss is that everybody experiences it. It doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter who you affiliate with. It's something that we all share in common. And people look at different organizations that are out there like Jewish and Widowed that are helping people deal with loss. They really are communal organizations. And it's something that when people look at it, in many ways, it brings communities together.
Maxwell pointed out that everybody is familiar with loss, but does everybody cope with loss similarly? You have this book, it's called Living with Loss, One Day at a Time. You do coaching. Can everybody learn the same lessons of how to deal with loss effectively?
So I'm going to answer that and say no in many ways, and I'm going to say yes in many ways.
Perfect Jewish answer.
It wasn't.
Perfect.
Well, the no is that we're all different and we all react differently. And when I lost my mother, which wasn't my first significant loss, I have 4 sisters, and all 5 of us grieve so differently, and to this day still grieve differently towards the whole situation with my mom. We find a way to live with it, but we reacted differently. And if we didn't have the patience for one and each other and the tolerance of each other, we wouldn't still be together and be close as we are. That was the no part, where everybody's different. But the yes part is having somebody removed from your life, whether it's sudden or even if it was a long-term illness or if it was a 97-year-old grandmother. It changes your perspective on life, but it also changes your history and your future. And so all of that goes together. And some of us that are more self-analytical and we try to analyze life are going to react differently to others that just are less emotional and just kind of go the next day.
I have had some training in grief counseling, and so I guess I'll ask you some questions that in journalism school they would say are sandbag questions.
Okay.
Where I think I probably know the answer a little bit, but I still want you to talk about it.
Sure.
First of all, is there such a thing as getting over grief?
I hesitate a little bit because grief, bereavement, mourning, those are strong words that are out there in our community that says when you lost somebody. But for me, do you ever get over grief? I don't think so, because you always miss the person you're with. You just find a different avenue to put those emotions and redefine your relationship with that person. So when I lost my husband 22 years ago and my daughter was 2, I keep a relationship with him. It's just different.
Is there a right way and a wrong way to mourn or to grieve?
I don't believe there is a right way or wrong way. I think it's your way. I think it's how you take it and what you want to do with it. There'll be people that will tell you along the way, and yes, with your training, you'd probably agree with this, I would think, is that there are people that say if you don't grieve, it's going to hit you later on in a different way. I think if you take the time to find the relationship with this person or what it looks like now for the rest of your life. I lost my grandmother many years ago. I took with her how to make challah and how to make rugelach. I feel she's with me at the high holidays when I make my round challah, and she's with me at Hanukkah time when I make my rugelach. Is she still alive? No, but I found a way. Do I grieve those holidays without her? I think I'm going to do that forever, but I brought her with me.
Do you subscribe to the, was it Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the stages of grief, that people go through certain definable stages of grief? Do you find that to be the case?
I think that she came up with a wonderful way of us, just to be able to put our arms around our grief. I think it's more circular than it is phases that will have a beginning and an end. My daughter graduated high school 16 years after her dad passed away, and being remarried and having my husband next to me, I had an aha moment that I was so sad, and everybody said to me, Rachel, it's a high school graduation. But to me, I really realized that I was the lucky one that got to live, and my husband that died wasn't. So do I go back to the shock and the denial and all that? Of course I do, because I stood there at the high school graduation saying, this couldn't have possibly happened, but it was 16 years earlier.
Within the idea of those stages of grief, there is an episode of The Simpsons that parodies it where Homer goes through all 5 stages in a span of 30 seconds, and you see him visibly change it, and then he's done. He's acceptance, and it's over. Obviously, that's an exaggeration. Obviously, it's not over, or it doesn't work like that. But talk a little bit about the idea of that last stage of acceptance, what that looks like. How did that come about for most people?
So for most people, I would say the acceptance becomes where you just realize this has happened to you. You realize that there's nothing that you can do to bring this loved one back. You get a little bit past why me, because I hung out there where most people do is hang out. Why did this happen to me? Especially in a sudden tragic death. I mean, we've got some huge things in our community here in Colorado that we question forever. Why did it happen to our neighborhood? So for those types of things where it's something that you can't put answers around, that acceptance is a little bit harder. When you've got an elderly person that got some kind of illness and they really had a full life, we move into a better acceptance of that because we can. It's the tragic, sudden, the ones that you can't understand. I think what happens is you don't go into an acceptance, you go into the mode of life that I was talking about earlier, that you go back to the memories and try to not keep thinking about the future.
I'd like to talk a little bit about your book. Living with Loss One Day at a Time. It's something that was published just shy of a year ago, September of 2013. It is set up very interesting. People can dive in at any point that they want to into the book, but in fact, you've divided it into daily lessons that come with what you describe as thought-provoking ideas to provide hope, optimism, introspection, and self-discovery. It actually sounds like it's a book that could be very useful even for people who are not coping with loss.
My current husband said to me when he was reading it, he said to me, this would be any kind of loss, and I agree. And it's just a motivator. I have to tell you why I chose to write the book this way. I've spent many, many years working with younger widows, younger grieving people, all types of people that have had different types of loss. And I listened to what they've said over the years. And what I didn't want to do was a memoir. I wanted to do something that could pay it forward and that somebody could get what I needed back in my early days of loss. Is I just needed daily encouragement. I try to solve my whole life in the first week that my husband passed away. And what I realized is it really is one day at a time. And so my first thought was, how do I convey the message that I would like people to take their loss? Don't try to solve it. Don't try to develop your new relationship with your loved one. Don't try to work at everything with your in-laws and your parents and all these other places that you feel these relationships have to be fixed or taken care of. One day at a time. And so there's no beginning, there's no end, there's no January, there's no December. It doesn't matter if you are 6 months out from your loss or whether you're 10 years out from your loss. It's just daily connections and lessons and thoughts of this happened to you and now what to do with it. Some days I'm harsh on the readers by saying, you need to get out of bed, you need to pull up those boots, you need to put them on, you need to lace them up and get out the door and figure out some things. And then there's other days I say, you know what, play hooky and go to a movie. Or, get a soothing cup of tea, or write a letter to somebody special. Every day is just something different.
What prompted you to write the book last year, as opposed to in any of the preceding years, going back to when you suffered the loss of your first husband?
It's purely logical because my life is logical. I had a ski accident and I was holed up in my house for a year. And I had all these years of that I wanted to write a book, and all of a sudden I had physical time. And I cranked it out once I sat down, but I was on crutches for a long time, so that's...
Rachel, you do a lot of public speaking, and when you do, you have an audience that's not dissimilar than the Radio Chavura audience. It's mixed. Some of the people in our audience may be fairly close to a loss. Other people may not have experienced a loss any time in recent memory. Give us a little sense as to, in your public speaking, what you say, to the extent that it goes beyond what we've already been talking about.
Well, that's a good question. I like the way you put your arms around that, because I do feel when I walk into a room, I try to take inventory of who's in the room, because you always have some people that are hidden in there, and they say that they're not coming because they haven't had a loss, and then they're the first ones that cry, and you kind of looking at them from the podium, and you're like, okay, I hit a chord, but they're not the person that's supposed to be in that spot. So what I try to do is take inventory, and I try to talk to everybody in the room of whether they could have had a loss, whether they're old, whether they could have a disease, whether they could have what we call a nuisance disease. It's something that is not chronic. I mean, it's chronic, but it's not life-threatening. So I try to make it a motivational as opposed to a grief and loss. Is that, take each, like as I have in the book, take each day and do the best of it. And not just as motivational as in motivational speaking, but more so motivational of you looking inside you and seeing how life is short. I mean, we know that. So just go out there and just take what I'm trying to say and don't take it personally.
You've got essentially 365 daily lessons. Can you give us, in just radio short form, a couple of your favorites?
So a couple of my favorites are always a connection with other people, because I do think that when we hold in our grief inside, that we don't communicate what we're doing. And I think what happens is it makes it very difficult for the people around you because they don't know what to do. So I would say the most of the ones that are in here, because we don't know what to do for people because we don't know what to do for ourselves. So I like the ones that are reaching you out. Like I tell you to have at least one meal a day with somebody else, so that you're not eating out of the pan or eating out of the refrigerator without cooking. I try to suggest people to verbalize your wants and needs, because people won't, like as I said, won't know what to do for you. So you verbalize what you need. Usually, I would say the ones that mean the most to me is connected to other people, building memorials, keeping the loved one alive. And what I like about that is you bring in all generations to whether it's a simple photo album or it's building a memorial for somebody like in a park, or it's putting together a scholarship. So I would say reaching out to all generations to include them all.
Would you say that the book is written for people who have suffered a loss in the very recent past, as in within a week or within a month of having lost a loved one? Or is your book intended in addition for people who have suffered loss much longer in the past?
Okay, so that's a loaded question, and I like it though, because for me, anticipatory loss, when somebody is ill for a long time, the book is really good for them. Okay, so any type of long-term disease, and some, as you know, some of these diseases, they can go on for 10 years. So I think the book is for any type of loss. I think what happens within the first 6 weeks, especially if it's a sudden or unexpected loss, they wouldn't even be able to read a page. So it's not good for them, but it will absolutely be good for them in 3 months. So I don't think there's a concrete audience for it. I think it's for anybody experiencing a loss.
And having going through and read the book after experiencing a loss, or while experiencing the loss of a loved one, at the end of 365 days, 365 pages, where do you envision the reader, the griever, as being? How have I grown at the end of the book from where I was when I started?
I believe the person that gets through them, and even if they only read 180 of them, I think they will be more encouraged to live life to the fullest, to get back on track. I think it'll give them the energy and the advice and the ideas to keep them going. Again, as I can repeat it a couple times, those sudden deaths are the ones that knock people off their shoes, and they really knock them down. And that this gives them hope, and that's what I like to do. Is it's just a little bit of hope. And I share the story about the Ragal and the Chala. You just got to bring it forward. You got to keep it going forward.
Rachel, we're running down on time, so I think I want to ask 2 other questions. Max, if you have a final question, think about it. One is how this book might differ from a book written by somebody who's not Jewish or doesn't have a Jewish upbringing. Is there a Jewish feel to this book, or is it equally applicable whether you're Jewish, not Jewish, whether you're raised Jewish, not raised Jewish?
It wasn't written with Jewish only in mind, because I have found through all my years of working with people, there's a tendency to move a little bit away from religion. It comes back, it usually always does, but there's a little bit of it. It's so that to get through what really gets you out of bed every day. But what's interesting of that particular question, because I talk in here a couple of days, like why have I lost my religion, or where has my religion gone, or trinkets to help me through. So it's brought in, it's touched upon, but it's not hovered. I'm going to use the word hover again. I think the Jewish piece of it, at the end of the day, I'm a Jewish mom, and I think I've got that hovering, taken care of, a little bit of chicken soup, a lot of bit of chicken soup in here.
This is a good book, whether you buy it for yourself, again, for a family member, for a neighbor, for a friend, for somebody in your synagogue group, someplace else. It is actually a very lovely way to show affection for people. What is your preferred way for them to buy the book? Is it online? Is it through a specific website? How do you encourage them to buy the book?
It depends on how they want it.
Okay.
If they get it through my website, then I get to sign it and write it to a person, and I mail it to whoever they want with a little gift note. There's
so give us your website first of all, so we have that.
Okay, so it's www.rachelkodanaz.com, and I'll spell it RACHELKODANAZ.com. And like I said, I will sign them and just make them to whoever they write a note to, whoever they want to write a note to. There's always Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I know Tattered Cover has it.
I also would say to people that, again, because we have a wide variety of people who listen, this might just be a nice resource for a synagogue to have. We talk with one of our program sponsors is Feldman Mortuary, and we have been tutored by Jamie Sarche there a little bit about that death is really part of the life cycle, and that there are many life cycle events where synagogues will present a book to somebody. At a bar mitzvah, they'll give them a book. I can honestly see this being something that Jewish institutions and non-Jewish institutions would say, you've suffered a loss, we've had a funeral, we've had Shiva, to provide a book to everybody. I mean, it would be a lovely thing, truly, for everybody from a synagogue or some other organization who suffers a loss. When you come to Shiva, you'd have these books. So I assume that they could also contact you about some bulk purchases.
Oh, absolutely. I did a program. I was honored to be the scholar in resident at a large synagogue in Kansas City last fall when the book first came out, and she did that. The rabbi there, she bought them for the congregation.
Maxwell, I told you I would give you the final word, so it's yours. Final question or word?
Final question.
Okay.
You have with you here who you brought along, who's not on the program, but sitting right next to you.
Supportively.
So, yes, a very special and important guest. So do you want to just briefly introduce who you have with you and how you met?
Yes, actually, who's here for those who are not in the room, because we are on radio.
If somebody who's not in the room is listening?
Yeah. So, just briefly for your listeners, my husband died when I was 31 and left me with a 2-year-old, and my knight in shining armor showed up a couple years later, and that's who's sitting in the room, and his name is Tanir. And the shout out that I really need to answer your question, Maxwell, the most about him is that I have been widowed from my deceased husband for 22 years, and as you can see, I'm sitting here and he's in the room with me. And so for all those people out there that say you can't talk about your loved one in front of other people, and especially your new spouse, I'm telling you right now, you've
been doing it the whole time. So Rachel Kodanaz, we want to thank you, wish you lots of success with this book. It is a public service. People who are suffering, again, I've gone through the training to be a grief counselor. Something like this book can really make a difference in people's quality of life. So.
Well, I thank you, and I thank the listeners.
שמע ישראל אלוהי, הקשור אני לבד, חזק אותי.
Please join us again next week for another edition of Radio Chavura. Until then, this is Maxwell Rothbart, along with
Dean Rothbart.
Shalom.
Good luck, all the best, till we hear from you again.
עשה שיגמר, כי לא נותר בי כוח.
He was a research biologist, she an early childhood educator. Today, they are Colorado's top sellers of kosher chicken soup. This is Dean Rothbart showing you how small business drives Colorado. Brought to you by Mountain States Toyota and 710 KNUS. Michael and Marcy Schreiber, owners of Denver's popular Eastside Kosher Deli, serve both the physical and spiritual hunger of their customers, offering classes and meeting space along with knishes and corned beef.
We like to call ourselves the Jewish Community Center.
The Schreibers bought the financially ailing deli in '97 rather than allow it to fail. Like so many entrepreneurs, their destiny was unscripted. Small Business Drives Colorado encourages you to keep our nation strong by supporting small business, the high-octane fuel of our economy.